The day Catherine Fraser stepped off the stagecoach in Silver Creek, Texas, in the scorching summer of 1878, she knew something was terribly wrong from the way the man waiting by the mercantile turned his face away the moment he saw her. She clutched her carpetbag tighter, her heart hammering against her ribs as she watched her intended husband, a merchant named William Henderson, take one long look at her before shaking his head and walking away without a single word. Catherine felt the familiar hot flush of shame creep up her neck, the same feeling she had endured countless times back in Philadelphia when people discovered her affliction. She stood alone in the dusty street, the afternoon sun beating down mercilessly on her navy traveling dress, watching the man she had corresponded with for 6 months disappear around the corner. Other travelers bustled past her, collecting their belongings and greeting loved ones, but Catherine remained frozen, uncertain what to do next. She had spent nearly all her savings on the journey west, trusting in the promises of a new life and acceptance that William's letters had painted so beautifully. Now, those promises lay shattered at her feet like broken glass. A hand touched her elbow, and Catherine jumped, spinning around to see a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair tucked under a simple bonnet. The woman's lips were moving, but Catherine could only catch fragments of sound from her right ear, the words jumbled and unclear. She turned her head slightly, angling her left ear toward the woman, her good ear, the one that still functioned properly after the fever that had stolen most of her hearing when she was 8 years old. "Are you all right, dear?" the woman asked, her voice now clearer. "I saw what happened. That William Henderson ought to be ashamed of himself. I am Martha Collins, and my husband runs the general store." Catherine blinked back tears, determined not to cry in the middle of the street like a child. "I do not know what to do. He did not even speak to me. He just left." Martha's expression hardened. "Men like that are not worth your tears. Come with me. You need somewhere to stay while you figure things out. We have a room above the store that we rent out." "I have very little money left," Catherine admitted, her voice quiet with humiliation. "We will worry about that later. Right now, you need to get out of this heat and have something to drink." Catherine followed Martha down the wooden sidewalk, grateful for the kindness of this stranger when everything else seemed to be crumbling around her. The general store was well stocked and clean, smelling of flour, coffee, and leather. Martha's husband, a portly man with a cheerful disposition named George, greeted them warmly and helped carry Catherine's bag upstairs to a small but comfortable room with a bed, washstand, and a window overlooking the main street. After Martha brought her water and some bread with butter, Catherine sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself to cry. She had been so hopeful, so certain that distance from Philadelphia and her pitying relatives would give her a fresh start. William's letters had been full of understanding when she had carefully explained her condition, assuring her that it made no difference to him. Clearly, the reality of having a wife who was hard of hearing was far different from the romantic notion of it in correspondence. Over the next few days, Catherine learned the harsh truth. William had spread word around town that he had rejected his mail-order bride because she was defective, a word that cut Catherine deeper than any blade could. She ventured out only for necessities, enduring the stares and whispers of the townspeople who now knew her story. Martha remained steadfast in her friendship, but even her kindness could not shield Catherine from the reality of her situation. Catherine needed work, and she needed it desperately. Her funds were nearly exhausted, and while Martha and George had been incredibly generous, she could not impose on them indefinitely. She inquired at the hotel about maid work, but the manager took one look at her and said he needed someone who could hear instructions properly. The seamstress said the same thing. Even the laundry wanted nothing to do with her. It was on her 6th day in Silver Creek that Catherine decided to walk to the edge of town, needing space from the judging eyes and pitying looks. The landscape stretched endlessly before her, all brown earth and scattered brush under the vast Texas sky. She found a large rock near a dried creek bed and sat down, letting the solitude wash over her. For the first time since arriving, she felt like she could breathe. She did not hear the horse approaching until it was quite close. Catherine turned her head and saw a man on a large chestnut mare, riding toward her at an easy pace. He was tall and lean, wearing dusty work clothes and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face from the sun. As he drew closer, she could see he had dark hair, a strong jaw covered with several days of stubble, and eyes the color of storm clouds. The man dismounted several feet away, and Catherine tensed, suddenly aware of how isolated they were. But his movements were slow and unthreatening as he approached, removing his hat to reveal a face that was handsome in a rough, weathered way. He appeared to be in his late 20s, with lines around his eyes that suggested he spent most of his time outdoors. "Afternoon, madam," he said, and Catherine turned her left ear toward him to hear better. "Did not mean to startle you. I am Patrick Parrish. I own the ranch about 3 miles west of here. Just wanted to make sure you were all right out here alone. It is not entirely safe." Catherine studied him warily. "I am fine, thank you. I just needed some air." Patrick nodded, his expression neutral but not unkind. "You are the woman who came for William Henderson, aren't you? I heard what happened. I am sorry he treated you that way." "News travels fast in small towns," Catherine said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "It does," Patrick agreed. He hesitated, then said, "Look, I do not mean to pry, but I also heard you have been looking for work. I could use help at my ranch. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, is getting on in years, and the work is getting too much for her. I need someone to help with cooking, cleaning, and mending. The pay is not great, but it comes with room and board in the main house. Mrs. Chen would be there too, so it would be entirely proper." Catherine stared at him, searching his face for any hint of mockery or ulterior motive. "Why would you offer me work when everyone else in town has turned me away? You must know about my hearing." Patrick met her gaze steadily. "I know you are hard of hearing." "I do not see why that matters for the work I need done. Can you cook?" "Yes." "Can you clean and mend?" "Yes." "Then I do not see the problem. Mrs. Chen can show you where everything is and what needs doing. Long as you can do the work, I do not care about anything else." Catherine felt a flicker of hope, fragile and tentative. "I would not want charity, Mr. Parrish." "It is not charity. I need the help and you need the work. Seems straightforward to me." He put his hat back on. "Think about it if you need to. I come into town for supplies every few days. You can let me know through George Collins at the general store." "I do not need to think about it," Catherine said quickly. "I accept. When would you like me to start?" "Day after tomorrow. That will give you time to settle your affairs in town. I will come by the general store at 8 in the morning to collect you." After Patrick rode away, Catherine sat for a long while, hardly daring to believe her luck. She returned to town with lighter steps and told Martha and George the news. Martha looked concerned. "Patrick Parrish is a good man, but he is very solitary. He lost his parents and younger brother to cholera 5 years back, and he has kept mostly to himself ever since. That ranch was his father's dream, and Patrick has worked himself near to death keeping it going. Just be careful, dear. A woman alone with a single man, even with Mrs. Chen there, will set tongues wagging." "Let them wag," Catherine said firmly. "I need honest work, and he is offering it. I cannot afford to worry about gossip." 2 days later, Patrick arrived at the general store precisely at 8 o'clock driving a wagon. He helped Catherine load her few belongings, nodded politely to Martha and George, and they set off toward his ranch. The ride took nearly an hour, and Patrick did not speak much, which Catherine found restful after days of people either talking too fast for her to follow or speaking to her, as if she were simple-minded. The Parrish ranch was larger than Catherine had expected, with a substantial main house built of wood and stone, a large barn, several outbuildings, and extensive corrals. Cattle grazed in the distance, and she could see several ranch hands working near the barn. The land stretched out in all directions, wild and beautiful in its starkness. Mrs. Chen turned out to be a tiny Chinese woman with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a neat bun and eyes that missed nothing. She was probably in her 60s, and she greeted Catherine with a thorough look that seemed to assess everything about her in seconds. "You are the one who is hard of hearing, Mrs. Chen asked bluntly, her accent thick but her words clear enough for Catherine to understand when she turned her left ear toward her. "Yes, madam. My left ear works well, but my right ear is mostly deaf." Mrs. Chen nodded briskly. "That is fine. I will make sure to speak on your left side. Come, I will show you your room and then we will go over what needs to be done." Catherine's room was small but clean, with a real bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the corrals. It was more than she had dared hope for. Mrs. Chen explained that Patrick took his meals at 6 in the morning and 6 in the evening, that he was not particular about food as long as there was plenty of it, and that he spent most of his time working on the ranch with his hired hands. "Mr. Patrick is a good man, Mrs. Chen said as she showed Catherine the kitchen. "He gave me work when no one else would. My husband died 10 years ago and people in town did not trust a Chinese woman. But Mr. Patrick, he did not care about that. He cares only if you work hard and are honest. You will be fine here if you are those things." Catherine threw herself into the work with determination. She rose before dawn to help Mrs. Chen prepare breakfast, cleaned the house until it shone, mended clothes and linens, and learned to bake bread the way Patrick liked it, with a crispy crust and soft interior. Mrs. Chen was a patient teacher, and Catherine was a quick study. The older woman's matter-of-fact attitude about Catherine's hearing was a blessed relief. She simply made sure Catherine could see her face when she spoke and repeated things without annoyance when necessary. Patrick was a quiet presence in the house. He came in for meals, always removing his hat and boots at the door, thanking them for the food, and then disappearing back outside to work. He rarely spoke beyond pleasantries, but Catherine noticed he was unfailingly polite and considerate. He never made her feel like a burden or an oddity. After 2 weeks at the ranch, Catherine began to relax. The work was hard, but it was satisfying, and she slept better than she had in years. The open landscape no longer seemed desolate to her, but rather peaceful. She loved watching the sunrise from the kitchen window while kneading bread dough and seeing the stars at night. So numerous they looked like someone had spilled diamonds across black velvet. One evening, as Catherine was washing dishes after supper, Patrick came into the kitchen instead of heading straight to his office as he usually did. She sensed his presence and turned, drying her hands on her apron. "Miss Fraser," he said, positioning himself on her left side without seeming to think about it. "I wanted to tell you that you are doing excellent work. Mrs. Chen says you have been a great help to her, and I have noticed the difference in the house. Thank you." Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity, Mr. Parrish. I am grateful." He nodded, then hesitated as if he wanted to say something else. Finally, he said, "I also wanted to apologize if coming out here has subjected you to more gossip. I heard some of the ranch hands talking, and apparently, people in town are saying unkind things about your reputation. I should have considered that before offering you the position." "You have nothing to apologize for," Catherine said firmly. "People will talk no matter what I do. At least here I am earning honest wages and doing useful work. That is more than I had in town." Patrick's expression softened slightly. "Still, it is not right. You have done nothing wrong." "Neither have you. Please do not concern yourself with idle gossip." He looked at her for a long moment, and Catherine had the strange feeling he was seeing her properly for the first time. Then he nodded and left the kitchen, but something had shifted between them. Some barrier had thinned. After that evening, Patrick began to linger a bit longer at meals, sometimes making conversation about the ranch or asking Catherine questions about her life in Philadelphia. She found herself looking forward to these moments, to the sound of his deep voice and the way he always made sure she could hear him. He never showed impatience when she had to ask him to repeat something, and he had developed a habit of angling his body so his face was visible to her. Mrs. Chen noticed and commented on it one morning while they were preparing breakfast. "Mr. Patrick likes you," she said matter-of-factly, cracking eggs into a bowl. Catherine nearly dropped the plate she was holding. "He is just being kind." "He is kind, yes, but this is different. I have worked for him for 5 years. He does not linger at meals. He does not ask personal questions. He does not make sure to stand on a person's good side when he talks to them unless he cares about that person." Mrs. Chen gave her a knowing look. "And you like him too. I see it in your face when he comes in." "Even if that were true," Catherine said, her cheeks burning, "it would not matter. He is my employer and I am a woman everyone in town considers damaged goods. Nothing could come of it." Mrs. Chen shrugged. "We will see." As spring turned toward summer, Catherine found it increasingly difficult to deny her growing feelings for Patrick. He was unlike any man she had ever known. He was quiet but not cold, strong but not cruel, solitary but not unkind. He treated her with a respect she had rarely experienced, as if her hearing impairment was simply a fact about her, no more significant than the color of her hair. She learned things about him in small increments. His father had built the ranch from nothing, and Patrick had worked alongside him since he was a boy. The cholera outbreak that took his family had nearly broken him, but he had poured his grief into the ranch, expanding the herd and improving the land. He had no other family, no sweetheart, no close friends. The ranch was his entire life. Catherine began to notice other things too. The way Patrick's eyes crinkled at the corners when something amused him. The way he was gentle with the animals, even the most stubborn ones. The way he paid his ranch hands fairly and never asked them to do anything he would not do himself. The way he always brought Mrs. Chen's special tea from town because he knew her joints ached, and the way he had quietly paid for the doctor when one of his hands broke his arm, not deducting it from the man's wages. One particularly hot afternoon in early June, Catherine was hanging laundry when she saw one of the ranch hands running toward the house, his face panicked. She could not hear what he was shouting, but she knew something was wrong. She dropped the shirt she was holding and ran toward him. "What is it?" she called. "What has happened?" The ranch hand, a young man named Tom, was breathing hard. His lips moved rapidly and Catherine caught only pieces. "Boss, trapped, bull." "Slow down," Catherine said urgently, gripping his arm. "Look at me and speak clearly." "What happened to Mr. Parrish?" Tom made a visible effort to calm himself. "Mr. Parrish was in the north pasture trying to separate a bull that got mixed in with the cows. The bull charged him and trapped him against the fence. We got the bull away, but Mr. Parrish is hurt. We have him in the barn. Sent someone for the doctor, but he is an hour away at best." Catherine did not waste time asking more questions. She ran to the barn, her skirts gathered in her fists. Inside, she found Patrick lying on a pile of hay bales, his face pale and drawn with pain. His shirt was torn, and she could see a nasty gash on his side that was bleeding heavily. Two ranch hands stood nearby, looking uncertain. Catherine pushed down her panic and knelt beside Patrick. His eyes were closed, and for a terrible moment she thought he might be unconscious, but then he opened them and looked at her. "Miss Fraser," he said, his voice tight with pain, "I am all right, just got knocked around a bit." "You are not all right. You are bleeding badly." She turned to the ranch hands. "Bring me clean cloth, hot water, and whiskey. Quickly." She had learned basic wound care from her mother, who had volunteered at a hospital in Philadelphia. Her hands were steady as she carefully lifted Patrick's torn shirt to examine the wound. It was deep but clean, probably from the fence rather than the bull's horns. Patrick hissed in pain as she probed gently around the edges. "I am sorry," she said softly. "I need to see how bad it is." "It is fine," Patrick said through gritted teeth. "You do not have to do this." "Wait for the doctor. The doctor is an hour away, and you are losing blood. I know what I am doing." The ranch hands returned with the supplies, and Catherine set to work cleaning the wound. Patrick made no sound of complaint, but she could see the muscles in his jaw clenching with each touch. When she poured whiskey over the gash to disinfect it, he finally let out a sharp breath. "I am almost done," Catherine said, binding the wound tightly with clean strips of cloth. "The doctor will need to stitch this properly, but this should stop the bleeding for now." When she finished, Patrick reached up with his good hand and caught hers. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You did not have to help me." "Of course I did," Catherine said, surprised. "Why would I not help you? Some people, they see a person hurt or in trouble and they freeze. You did not. You took charge and knew what to do." Catherine realized she was still holding his hand. She could feel the calluses on his palm, the strength in his fingers even weakened by injury. "You gave me work when no one else would. You treated me with respect when others treated me like I was broken. Of course I would help you." Something shifted in Patrick's eyes, some emotion Catherine could not quite name, but that made her heart beat faster. The moment was broken when the doctor arrived, bustling and efficient, shooing everyone away so he could examine Patrick properly. The doctor confirmed that Catherine had done an excellent job with the immediate care, and that the wound, while painful, was not life-threatening. He stitched Patrick up, gave him laudanum for the pain, and ordered him to rest for at least a week. Patrick was a terrible patient. He tried to get up the very next morning to check on the ranch, and it took the combined efforts of Catherine, Mrs. Chen, and his ranch foreman, a gruff man named Hank, to keep him in bed. Catherine found herself spending more time in Patrick's room, bringing him meals and making sure he took his medicine. He protested at first, saying she had enough work to do, but she insisted. "Mrs. Chen and I have everything under control," she told him firmly. "You need to rest and heal, or that wound will get infected and then you will be no good to anyone." Patrick studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "You are bossy when you want to be, Miss Fraser. Only when people are being stubborn, Mr. Parrish." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, the first real smile she had seen from him. "Fair enough." Over the next several days, as Patrick was confined to his bed, they talked more than they ever had before. Catherine would sit in the chair beside his bed, mending or knitting, and Patrick would tell her about the ranch, his plans for expanding the herd, his memories of his family. In turn, Catherine told him about her childhood in Philadelphia, about the fever that had taken her hearing, about the way people had treated her differently after that. "My parents loved me, but they worried constantly about my future," she said one afternoon. her fingers busy with a shirt that needed buttons replaced. They could not imagine how I would survive without a husband to take care of me. When they died within a year of each other, my aunt and uncle took me in, but they saw me as a burden. My uncle finally suggested I try to find a husband through correspondence, thinking distance might work in my favor. That is how I ended up writing to William Henderson. "He is a fool," Patrick said bluntly. "Any man would be lucky to have you." Catherine felt her cheeks warm. "You are kind to say so." "I am not being kind, I am being honest. You are hardworking, capable, intelligent, and brave. The fact that you are hard of hearing does not change any of that." Catherine set down her mending and looked at him. "Why does it not bother you? Most people see my hearing as a defect, something that makes me less than whole." Patrick was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. "When I was a boy, there was an old cowhand who worked for my father. His name was Jim, and he had lost his right leg below the knee in an accident. He used a wooden leg, and he could not move as fast as the other hands, but he was the best horseman my father ever employed. He understood cattle better than anyone. My father once told me that a man is not defined by what he lacks, but by what he does with what he has. I have never forgotten that." He met Catherine's eyes. "You do not let your hearing define you. You adapt, you work hard, you find ways to do what needs doing. That is what matters." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. "I wish more people saw it that way. Their blindness is not your fault." From that day forward, something deepened between them. Catherine could no longer pretend her feelings were merely gratitude or friendship. She was falling in love with Patrick Parrish, with his quiet strength and his thoughtful nature, and the way he saw her as whole when the world saw her as broken. But she kept those feelings locked away. Patrick was her employer, and she was a woman with no prospects and a damaged reputation. She could not risk losing her position by making him uncomfortable with unwanted affection. Patrick healed steadily, and within 2 weeks, he was back to light work, though Catherine and Mrs. Chen still fussed over him to make sure he did not overdo it. Life returned to its normal rhythm, but the ease between Catherine and Patrick remained. They fell into a pattern of sitting on the front porch in the evenings after the work was done, watching the sun set over the vast Texas landscape. One evening in late June, as they sat in the comfortable silence that had become familiar between them, Patrick suddenly said, "Catherine, can I ask you something?" It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice made her pulse quicken. "Of course." "Are you happy here? At the ranch, I mean. Is this the kind of life you want?" Catherine considered the question carefully. "I am happier than I have been in a very long time. The work is good and Mrs. Chen is wonderful. The ranch is peaceful. Why do you ask?" Patrick was quiet for a moment, then said, "Because I need to know if you would consider staying permanently, not just as hired help but as—" He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "Mrs. Chen is planning to retire at the end of summer. Her daughter in San Antonio has been asking her to come live with her, and I think she is ready. I need someone to run the household, but more than that He stopped, took a breath, and started again. "I have been alone for a long time, Catherine. I thought I was fine with that the ranch was enough. But since you came here, I have realized how empty this house has been. How empty I have been." Catherine's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. "What are you saying, Patrick?" He turned to face her fully, and in the fading light, his eyes were intense. "I am saying that I have come to care for you deeply. I know I am not a romantic man or good with words, but you have become important to me. More than important. I think about you constantly. I look forward to meals just so I can see you. I make excuses to come into the house during the day just to hear your voice. I am falling in love with you, Catherine, and I want to know if you could ever feel the same way about me. Catherine stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "You are falling in love with me." "I am. I know I should not burden you with this. You work for me, and that makes things complicated. If you do not feel the same way, we can forget I said anything, and nothing has to change." "Patrick," Catherine said softly, "I have been in love with you for weeks. I just did not think someone like you could want someone like me. Someone like me, a good man, a strong man, a man who could have any woman he wanted." Patrick reached over and took her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "I do not want any woman. I want you. I want your strength and your kindness and your courage. I want to sit with you on this porch every evening for the rest of my life. I want to wake up knowing you are in this house. I want to build a life with you, Catherine, if you will have me." Catherine felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. "Yes, yes, I want that too." Patrick pulled her gently toward him, and she went willingly. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "May I kiss you, please?" His kiss was tender at first, almost hesitant, as if he were afraid she might break. But as Catherine leaned into him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, the kiss deepened, becoming more certain. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Patrick rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he whispered. "Not because you need security or because I need a housekeeper, but because I love you and want you to be my wife in every way that matters." "Yes," Catherine said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They sat on that porch holding each other as the stars came out, making quiet plans for their future. Patrick wanted to marry quickly, before the end of summer, and Catherine agreed. There was no reason to wait when they both knew what they wanted. The news of their engagement created quite a stir in Silver Creek. When Patrick came into town with Catherine beside him to arrange for the wedding and to buy her a simple gold band, the gossips had a field day. William Henderson, in particular, seemed disgruntled that the woman he had rejected was marrying one of the most successful ranchers in the county. Martha Collins was delighted, hugging Catherine tightly when they stopped by the general store. "I knew Patrick Parrish was a good man." "I am so happy for you, dear." Mrs. Chen, when they told her, simply nodded with satisfaction. "I told you he liked you," she said to Catherine with a small smile. "I am glad you both finally admitted it, and do not worry about me retiring. I was waiting to make sure you would be all right first." They were married on a Sunday afternoon in August, in the small church in Silver Creek. The ceremony was simple, attended by Mrs. Chen, the ranch hands, Martha and George Collins, and a handful of other townspeople who had come to respect Catherine's hard work and Patrick's integrity. Catherine wore a new dress of soft blue cotton that Martha had helped her make, and Patrick wore his best suit, looking uncomfortable but handsome. When the minister asked Patrick to speak his vows, he turned to face Catherine fully, taking both her hands in his. He spoke clearly and firmly, making sure she could see his face and hear every word from her good ear. "I, Patrick James Parrish, take you, Catherine Marie Fraser, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to stand by your side, to speak into your good ear forever, to listen when you speak, and to love you with everything I have for as long as I draw breath." Catherine felt tears slipping down her cheeks as she spoke her own vows, promising to love him, to build a life with him, and to face whatever came their way together. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Patrick leaned down and kissed her gently, and Catherine felt like her heart might burst with happiness. This man, this good, strong, quiet man, loved her completely, saw her completely, accepted her completely. It was more than she had ever dared to hope for. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with Mrs. Chen having prepared an enormous feast despite Catherine's protests that she should not go to so much trouble. The ranch hands were in high spirits, toasting the newlyweds with enthusiasm. Even some of the townspeople who had been coldest to Catherine seemed to have softened, impressed perhaps by Patrick's clear devotion to his new wife. As the sun began to set and the guests started to drift away, Patrick took Catherine's hand and led her to the front porch where they had first confessed their feelings for each other. The sky was ablaze with orange and pink, the air finally cooling after the heat of the day. "Happy?" Patrick asked, pulling her close. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Catherine said honestly, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way," Patrick promised. He turned her gently so that her left ear was toward him, then leaned close and whispered, "I love you, Catherine Parrish." The sound of his voice saying her new name, so close to her good ear, so full of tenderness and devotion, made Catherine's heart swell. She tilted her face up to his. "I love you too." Their life together fell into a comfortable rhythm over the following weeks. Catherine took over full management of the household after Mrs. Chen's departure for San Antonio. She discovered she loved being mistress of her own home, making decisions and running things according to her own standards. Patrick was supportive in everything, always asking her opinion, always making sure she felt heard and valued. The ranch hands, who had been uncertain about having a woman who was hard of hearing as their boss's wife, quickly came to respect Catherine. She was fair, hardworking, and surprisingly tough when the situation called for it. She learned to help with some of the ranch work too, particularly tending to sick or injured animals, as her gentle touch and patience made her a natural healer. As autumn arrived and the brutal Texas heat finally eased, Catherine realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but wanted to be certain before telling Patrick. When she finally shared the news with him one evening after supper, his face transformed with joy. "A baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Catherine asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "I am beyond happy. I never thought I would have a family again after I lost my parents and brother. But now I have you, and soon we will have a child. You have given me more than I ever dreamed possible, Catherine." Patrick became even more protective of Catherine after that, trying to take on tasks she had always done so she would not overwork herself. Catherine had to remind him multiple times that she was pregnant, not ill, and that she was perfectly capable of continuing her normal activities. "You are worse than a mother hen," she teased him one morning when he tried to insist she should not carry a basket of laundry. "I just want to make sure you and the baby are safe," Patrick said, looking sheepish. "We are safe. I promise I will be careful and will ask for help if I need it. But you have to let me live my life or I will go mad with boredom." Patrick kissed her forehead. "All right, but I reserve the right to worry. I would expect nothing less." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the autumn and into winter. Catherine's body changed, her stomach growing round with their child, and Patrick seemed fascinated by every development. He would sit with her in the evenings, his hand resting on her belly, marveling when the baby kicked. "He is strong," Patrick would say. "Takes after his mother." "Or she takes after her father," Catherine would counter. On a cold February night in 1879, Catherine went into labor. Patrick sent one of the ranch hands racing to town to fetch the doctor and the midwife, while he stayed by Catherine's side, holding her hand and whispering encouragement. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Patrick never left her, staying close to her left side, making sure she could hear him, telling her how strong she was, how much he loved her, how proud he was of her. When their son finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Patrick wept openly. He held the tiny bundle with infinite care, looking from the baby to Catherine and back again with an expression of such love and awe that Catherine felt her own eyes filling with tears despite her exhaustion. "He is beautiful," Patrick said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are amazing. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for this gift." They named him Samuel Patrick Parrish, Samuel after Patrick's father. Sam was a healthy, hungry baby who kept them both busy day and night. Catherine worried at first about caring for an infant when she could not hear his cries if he was in another room or if he was on her right side, but Patrick was endlessly supportive. "We will figure it out together," he said. "We always do." They developed a system. Patrick installed a bell in Sam's nursery that Catherine could ring if she needed help during the day when Patrick was out working. At night, Patrick would wake at the slightest sound and gently wake Catherine if Sam needed feeding. As Sam grew older and more aware, he seemed to instinctively understand his mother's limitation, always making sure he was on her left side when he wanted her attention. Life on the ranch continued to thrive. Patrick had 2 good years with the cattle, selling his herd for excellent prices and expanding his operations. He hired more hands and bought more land. Catherine managed the growing household with skill, her reputation in town gradually transforming from that deaf woman William Henderson rejected to Patrick Parrish's capable wife. When Sam was 2 years old, Catherine became pregnant again. This time, she was less anxious about the birth, having been through it once before. Patrick was just as attentive as he had been the first time, perhaps even more so since he knew what to expect. Their daughter arrived on a spring morning, much more quickly than Sam had. Patrick had barely had time to send for the midwife before Catherine was holding their daughter, a tiny, dark-haired baby girl with her father's gray eyes. "What should we name her?" Catherine asked, exhausted but happy. Patrick looked at his daughter for a long moment, then said, "Rose." "After your mother." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. Her mother had been named Rose, and she had died when Catherine was 20, never knowing that her daughter would find such happiness. "Rose Marie Parrish," Catherine said. "It is perfect." With 2 young children, the ranch house was full of life and noise. Sam was a rambunctious, curious boy who followed his father everywhere, already declaring that he would be a rancher just like Papa. Rose was quieter, more observant, but with a stubborn streak that reminded Patrick of Catherine. Catherine sometimes thought back to that terrible day when she had stepped off the stagecoach in Silver Creek, watching her intended husband walk away, feeling like her life was over. She had been so certain that she was unwanted, that her hearing loss made her unworthy of love and family. How wrong she had been. How beautifully, wonderfully wrong. One evening when Sam was 4 and Rose was 2, Catherine and Patrick sat on their front porch as they had done countless times before. The children were asleep, the ranch was quiet, and the stars were brilliant overhead. Patrick had his arm around Catherine and she was leaning against him, perfectly content. "You ever regret it?" Patrick asked suddenly. "Coming out here, everything that happened with Henderson." Catherine turned to look at him, surprised. "Regret it? How could I regret anything that led me to you? I just mean it must have been so hard, being rejected like that, being gossiped about." "It was hard," Catherine acknowledged. "But if William Henderson had not rejected me, I never would have needed work. I never would have come to your ranch. We never would have met. So no, I do not regret it. Every difficult thing I went through was worth it because it brought me here to this life, to you and our children." Patrick turned her gently so her left ear was toward him, then leaned close the way he always did when he had something important to say. "I love you, Catherine, more with every passing day. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "And you are the best thing that ever happened to me," Catherine whispered back. The years continued to pass, full and rich. Sam grew into a strong, capable boy who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Rose developed a talent for drawing and could often be found sketching the horses or the landscape. When Rose was 5, Catherine gave birth to another daughter whom they named Anna, and 2 years after that, a son they called Jack. The ranch house that had once been silent and lonely was now filled with the sounds of children laughing, running, playing. Catherine managed the household with help from a young woman named Maria who came from town 3 times a week. Patrick continued to build the ranch into one of the most successful in the county. But through all the busy years, through the challenges and joys of raising 4 children and running a ranch, Patrick never forgot his promise. Every day, whether he was coming in for breakfast or saying goodnight, whether he was leaving for a cattle drive or returning home, he would lean close to Catherine's left ear and whisper his love. "I love you," he would say, sometimes adding something more, sometimes letting those 3 words stand alone. But he never forgot, never failed to make sure Catherine heard those words clearly, felt their truth deeply. Catherine's hearing in her right ear eventually faded to complete deafness, but it did not matter. Patrick and the children always made sure she could hear them, always positioned themselves accordingly, always spoke clearly and patiently. Her limitation became simply a part of the family's routine, accommodated without fuss or resentment. Silver Creek continued to grow over the years. The railroad came through in 1885, bringing more people and more opportunities. The Parrish Ranch became known throughout the region for its quality cattle and fair dealings. Catherine became involved in the small community church, teaching Sunday school and organizing charitable efforts for families in need. The same people who had once whispered about her now respected her, sought her advice, and valued her friendship. William Henderson eventually married a woman from Dallas and moved away, his mercantile failing after he tried to cheat too many customers. Catherine felt only pity for him. He had let fear and prejudice rob him of the possibility of happiness, while she had found more joy than she had ever imagined possible. As their children grew into young adults, Catherine and Patrick watched with pride. Sam became Patrick's full partner in running the ranch at 21, showing the same dedication and skill his father had. Rose married a schoolteacher from town, a kind man who loved her gentle nature and artistic talent. Anna showed an interest in medicine and began studying with the town doctor, one of the first young women in the area to do so. Jack, the youngest, was still finding his way but showed promise as a horseman. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Patrick organized a celebration at the ranch, inviting everyone from miles around. Martha and George Collins, now elderly but still spry, came from town. The ranch hands, some new and some who had been there since Catherine first arrived, joined the festivities. Neighbors, friends, and family filled the house and yard. As the party wound down and the sun began to set, Patrick took Catherine's hand and led her away from the crowd, out to the spot where they used to sit on the front porch in those early days of their courtship. 25 years, Patrick said, shaking his head in wonder. Sometimes it feels like just yesterday that you arrived at this ranch, and sometimes it feels like you have always been here. I feel the same way, Catherine said, her hair now threaded with gray, her face lined with the marks of a life well lived. These have been the best years of my life. Patrick reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. I got you something. Inside was a delicate gold locket. Patrick opened it to show Catherine what was inside. On one side was a tiny photograph of the 2 of them from their wedding day, and on the other was a photo of all 4 children. It is beautiful, Catherine said, tears filling her eyes. Patrick took the locket and fastened it around her neck, then turned her so her left ear was toward him. He leaned close, his voice soft and full of the same devotion it had held 25 years ago. "I love you, Catherine Parrish. You took a broken, lonely man and gave him a reason to live again. You gave me a family, a home, a future. You are my heart, my partner, my everything. And I will keep whispering my love in your good ear for as long as I draw breath, just as I promised." Catherine turned to face him, cupping his weathered face in her hands. "And I will love you just as long, Patrick. You saw me when others looked away. You valued me when others dismissed me. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. You are my miracle, my home, my everything." They kissed as the sun set over the Texas landscape. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life of love and purpose from the ashes of rejection and loss. The years continued to roll forward. Grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with new life and laughter. Sam and his wife had 3 children. Rose had 2. Anna eventually married a fellow doctor and had a daughter. Jack married a rancher's daughter from the next county over and brought her home to help run the family ranch. Catherine and Patrick grew old together, their hair silver, their movements slower, but their love as strong as ever. They still sat on the front porch in the evenings when the weather allowed, watching the sun set over land they had worked and loved for decades. On a warm evening in May of 1914, when Catherine was 65 and Patrick was 68, they sat together as usual, holding hands and watching the sky turn gold and pink. Their great-grandchildren were playing in the yard, and the sound of their laughter drifted on the breeze. Patrick turned to Catherine, positioned himself by her left ear, and whispered, "I love you." "I love you too," Catherine replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Always." Patrick squeezed her hand. "Remember when you first came to this ranch? You were so determined to prove yourself, so afraid I would reject you like Henderson did. I remember. I thought you were taking pity on me." "I thought I was just hiring help," Patrick admitted. "I had no idea I was inviting my future, my family, my entire life to come live under my roof. Best decision I ever made. Best thing that ever happened to me too," Catherine said. "Even the hard parts, maybe especially the hard parts, because they taught me that I was stronger than I knew." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink lower. The ranch spread out before them, a testament to decades of hard work and dedication. The house behind them was full of love and family. Their children and grandchildren were happy, healthy, building their own lives while staying connected to the land and legacy Patrick and Catherine had created together. As darkness fell and the stars began to emerge, Patrick helped Catherine to her feet. They walked slowly into the house together, still hand in hand as they had been for nearly 40 years. In the morning, they would wake up together as they had done for thousands of mornings before, and Patrick would lean close to Catherine's good ear and whisper his love as he always did. The rejected bride had found her home. The lonely rancher had found his heart. And together, they had built something beautiful, something lasting, something that would endure long after they were gone. Their love story, born from rejection and blossoming in the vast Texas landscape, had become the foundation for generations to come. In a world that had seen Catherine as defective and broken, Patrick had seen her as she truly was, strong, capable, and worthy of devoted love. He had whispered that devotion in her good ear every day of their marriage, and in doing so, had given her the greatest gift anyone had ever given her, the gift of being truly seen, truly heard, truly loved. And that, Catherine thought as she drifted off to sleep that night in Patrick's arms, was the only thing that had ever really mattered. The ranch continued under Sam's management, then eventually passed to his son. The land flourished, the family grew, and the story of Patrick and Catherine became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The story of how love could bloom in the most unlikely circumstances, how kindness could transform lives, and how a whisper in the right ear could change everything. Years later, when their great-great-grandchildren walked the land and asked about the photographs hanging in the ranch house, they would hear the story. The story of a woman who was rejected for something she could not help, and the man who loved her not despite her difference but simply because she was herself. The story of quiet devotion, of promises kept, of a love that had built something lasting. And they would understand that real love was not about perfection. It was about seeing someone fully, accepting them completely, and choosing them every single day. It was about standing on the correct side and speaking clearly. It was about whispers in good ears and promises kept for a lifetime. The Parrish Ranch stood as a monument to that truth, and the legacy of Patrick and Catherine's love continued to shape their family for generations. A reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the moments we think will break us. Sometimes, being rejected by the wrong person is simply making room for the right person to find us. And sometimes, all we need is someone who will position themselves so we can hear them say, "I love you," and mean it with their whole heart, every single day forever.